Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. Jesse, it is a beautiful day here in the Northeast after a bunch of rain, and the sun's out, sun's shining. I'm feeling more optimistic about life. I'm telling you.
That's good. Well, I won't see the sun until June, so I don't really know what that's like, but out here in the Pacific Northwest this time of year, it's dark when we come to work and dark when we get home from work. So it's just a long, dark winter has come. But we're talking shop today. I love our conversations, Jason, and we're talking how do we have healthier churches? How do we help our churches flourish and do the kinds of things that we need to do and to be thinking about for the sake of the mission that God has called us to. So glad that we can keep that conversation going today.
Yeah, and I mean this conversation, John, our guest, John Terech. We have a guest today. Hey, we haven't had a guest in a while. So anyway, I love this conversation because we're talking about something that's it's like our sweet spot of like what we care about the most in this world. And that is helping to build a flourishing church and church health. And how do we know what the target is? I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that when you get started into any sort of revitalization effort or church health efforts, you're sort of wondering, where do we start? What do we do? How do we measure? How do I know what we're doing is working? How do I know what I pick? I mean, there's so many questions.
That's right.
That it could be a little bit crippling in the sense that sometimes we sort of freeze because we don't know what to do. And I think
what does success look like?
Helpful.
Yeah. And so this is what John asks. And as you get into the episode, John's going to share a little bit of his story and his background, but then he's going to move us to that question. How do we know what success looks like? How do we define it? And then what are some things we can build around that to help us just be evaluating our churches? How are we doing in these areas for the sake of the mission that God has called us to? So I love it. I'm so grateful. John, if you're listening back to the episode, thanks for joining us. And we're excited to have John Terech join us. He's the Executive Director of Operations for ECO and does a lot of great stuff behind the scenes to make the denomination that I'm a part of here and our church here at Marine View is a part of to help make it go. John's a coach. He works with church governance. He does a lot of great things behind the scenes to help our churches to flourish. And so grateful for John. A couple other things about John. I'm just going to read a little bit of his bio because it's pretty cool. But John Terech is a former Wall Street executive and New York native. Graduated from Boston University with a degree in business administration and is a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation. He's a commissioned lay pastor in ECO. John has served in ministry in Palm City, Florida from 2005 to 2023 and currently in Cumming, Georgia. John also attended Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary and Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando. He is married to Patty Terech, and they have 3 children. John III graduated of the University of Central Florida. Joseph graduating from University of North Georgia in 2026. And Lindsay, a senior at South Forsyth High School. So that's John in a nutshell, and you're going to get to know him much more in our episode coming up.
Yeah, so it was a great conversation. He's a sharp guy, and we had such a good time talking that we talked for an hour. So we're going to break this into 2 episodes, understanding this time of year. We want to make sure we give you a little more of a bite-sized episode because there is a lot that we go through and a lot that we think of. And before we jump to that interview, I just want to thank you all for listening. Hey, do us a favor, give us a review, share it with a colleague, get the word out about the Reclaim Leader podcast as we continue to try to reach more and more church leaders for the sake of developing healthy churches. And and our 2 churches are on that list. We are always trying. It's a moving
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Always trying. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. And now let's get into it. This is our interview with John Terech.
Well, hey, everybody, again, so glad to welcome John Terech to the podcast today. And John, you and I have had a lot of fun lately. We've been doing some coaching things, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit in our episode. But John serves as the Executive Director of Operations for ECO. And beyond that, you bring a heart for the local church to flourish. And so we're just talking shop a little bit with John today about what does it look like, or what are some of the marks or measures of a flourishing church. So John, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Happy to be with you across the country here. I'm in northeast of Atlanta. You're all the way in Washington, so we're covering the whole globe.
Yeah,
here,
we got
right?
Tacoma, New Jersey. We got Atlanta
everywhere.
area. We got the whole gamut covered.
It's all good.
The so common Tacoma to New Jersey.
The Tacoma, New Jersey connection, is a pretty standard one these days.
Yeah.
But okay, so for those that maybe don't know you super well, or maybe who's John Terech? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at ECO. How did you end up doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, because I could not have written this story, but so I grew up in Long Island, New York, went to college at Boston University, came out of college with a finance degree, and then went to work on Wall Street for the first 13 years of my career. So I loved it. I want to say, I was doing a lot of work in finance, a lot of stock trading essentially. And so that was from 1993, to give you a time frame, 1993 until 2005. So I was in New York for 9/11, and that drastically changed my trajectory for what I wanted to do, what I felt called to do. And so, wrestling with God a little bit, I decided to move to Florida. I was married. We had two boys at the time. This is now 2005. We finally made it down to Florida, and I bought a restaurant, which was one of the big mistakes of my life. But nevertheless, I had watched the Food Network, and I thought I was pretty well schooled in how to do all that. I mean, you snap your fingers and the money would just pile in, BAMs, things like that. But anyway, when I got to Florida, I also started ministry of all things. The Wall Street guy. I started ministry at a small church in Palm City, Florida, and I can't say small. It was actually mid-sized, so 500 or so members, and I was the $100 a week youth pastor for quite some time. And as the restaurant quickly, folded in a sense, because we had hurricanes, we had all kinds of things in Florida that I was not used to, and then a mortgage crisis on top of that, which well documented in movies like The Big Short, that type of thing. But so I had this business that was crumbling, and the youth ministry, crazy thing, God was doing something there, and it went from 11 kids to like 60 kids in about a year or so. So I was quickly felt the call to ministry, like plain as day, right? It's like it was success, and the business was failing. So the church decided to bring me on full time, doing a lot of the business functions of the church, because that's my background, and then doing the youth and family ministries. So again, weird skill set. So the church was using me in this way. The presbytery, we were in a different denomination than ECO at the time. They were asking me to do some things, related to staff, and just trying to restructure and kind of put together, in a sense, a direction for the presbytery, administratively at least. And that's where I got to meet and work with Dana Allen, who's also we were in the same presbytery down in South Florida. And so this had to be like 2007 and 2008 that we started working together. Well, as things progressed, again, well documented how ECO was formed, and both he and I kind of got tapped to do different things. I was kind of working on like health insurance plans and retirement plans and those sorts of things for denomination, a lot of legal stuff. And Dana was on the committee to write polity. So everything started to come together, and ECO was formed. We launched January 2012, and in June of that same year, 2012, both Dana's church and our church in Palm City, two different churches, were about 20 miles apart, entered ECO as some of the first churches really in the denomination. So I think we had a total of 15 on the 15th. And we had one church before up by you. Jesse was up. Tacoma was the first one.
Yeah, first
first church in May 15th. So Dana and I's work continued, and they asked him to be the synod executive, and then they asked me to be this kind of second person, this more executive type. We call it executive director of operations now. It had different titles before, COO, all this other stuff before, but But that's what I've been doing ever since. So right from the beginning of, some of the meetings in January, particularly in Orlando, that I start to do the work, and then finally came on because they didn't have any money and no churches, right? So we're doing a lot of volunteer work. And then in January of 2014 is when it became official full-time on the staff. Dana was the year prior. So we just kind of grew from there with the budget and added staff from there. But I was also kind of moderator of the Presbytery of the East. We only had 2 presbyteries. So yeah, just it's a weird thing going from Wall Street to all this. And I went to seminary for 2 years at 2 different seminaries and never finished. It's just too much other stuff going on. So
too busy doing ministry.
I'm just exactly doing ministry. And then I never thought to go and finish. So I'm technically a commissioned lay pastor of the second variety, as we say. So they commissioned me to do this work, which helps out because I go and guest preach and do and administer the sacraments that way. But I'm not technically, I don't have an MDiv, and I'm not fully ordained, just commissioned to do this. But I think that's where God wants me, right? It's like I'm doing my work is just weirdly specialized, and but yet still. With the seminary background, I get to see all of the ministry world, right? And so I focus more on the business side of things, obviously, but I can do and function in the other space, the theological side. But it's been great. Again, it's just so weird, but I feel like this is what God's calling me to do, and I'm not getting any younger, so I can't be a pro golfer or professional fishing guide. I don't think I could be a professional bourbon taster, but they don't pay for that. So I don't know.
I love in your story, John, how it's just sometimes we see different chapters of our lives and we think maybe they're wasted chapters. And the cool thing is when you can see God weaving in and out and pulling it all together for exactly what you've been called to do. And I want to segue to that as to just sort of looking at the larger church. I think your experience in ministry, my experience in ministry, Jesse's, and every pastor that listens to this podcast, we definitely have a desire to see our churches get healthier. And we've had guests on here before, like Carl Vaders, who are very critical in a good way of making sure that we don't think that numerical growth equals health. That, just sort of like the human body, I could get pretty big unhealthily, as can I get big in a more healthy way. So I want to talk a little bit about, these measures of health, these measures of flourishing churches that we're going to be talking about today. There's 6 of them. Yeah. What do these measures help us to do? How do they help us focus or help church leaders focus on health that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have been focusing on?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to back up a little bit, all right? So we had a chance, with the new denominations, a lot of new things, right? We had a chance. I think we still have kind of a chance, even though we're 12 years in or 13 years in, I guess, to reframe things. And so I use that term frame, but it really is the vision frame. So Church Unique book by Will Mancini really, affected us deeply in a sense of like, this is an opportunity to instill some of this learning and practice in that book to the whole denomination and really have that language throughout. So we're trying to create a culture when you think about it, right? Because it's a new thing. And so we didn't want to be like, what everybody else was doing in the Presbyterian world for so long. So Church Unique, that book, Will Mancini, again, if you haven't read it, I'm sure you guys have, but it's just absolutely pivotal, I think, in our thinking. So what we decided to do is go through the whole process. Will kind of helped us through it. And he did help us through it. So when we look at what the book gets to is answering these irreducible questions of leadership. So he takes Lencioni's 6 questions, he formulates 5 out of them. And so the first one is, what do we do, essentially? And that's our mission, right? So that's our mission. And every church and every denomination has a mission. Every organization has a mission statement, which is fine. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. So, we want to be building flourishing churches that make disciples of Jesus Christ. That's ECOS. And it didn't take us long to get there. I think we actually had that before we got into the vision frame process. The values took some time. We had we reformulated the values we had, which I guess the fellowship still uses the same the values that we had, right? So that we kind of came up with those together, but we wanted to really rethink the values. So those are different now. So that's the why we do things, the how, the strategies. So we spent a lot of time figuring that out, and it's not complex. I mean, it's like 3 points to that. But then there's that fourth frame, and that is answering the question of when are we successful? Mm-hmm. And this is the question. I've been doing this a while, but it's still the question that really confounds people. Is like, all right, so when are we successful as a church? Now, mm-hmm. the answer to that question still lies in it relates to what are we doing? It's the mission. So if we're accomplishing our mission, then we know we're going to be successful. Now, every church has probably a mission statement that has something to do with discipleship. But are we measuring discipleship, right? Do we have measures of discipleship? And are we actually concerned about them enough to say, well, we'll be successful when our people look like or are doing this thing? Now, the book has a great thing about Joe Grow, and I won't get into that. But it really... at the end of the day, it's like, what does Joe become? What does a person in our church become? Well, what does a church in ECO become? Mm-hmm. That's the way we were looking at it, right? So if we're building flourishing churches, then we have to focus on measures of flourishing. So we came up with those, a lot of wordsmithing. It takes a lot of time, and Will was great with that. Dana did a lot more of that heavy lifting than I did. I was more comic relief, I think, as I am in most things. But we got to that place, and then we went through a process of trying to go through psychometric, testing of getting a survey together to analyze our churches doing that. So we have a church health assessment that's related to this. But again, the key question here that we're trying to answer is, when are we successful? And so we had to have something in place. And I wish I could say that it was more widely known by our churches that these are the marks or the measures that we're doing it, because as you guys both know, it's like most of our people are looking at different measures mm-hmm. than what our mission is. Yeah. Right. It's like they're like, I think you even said, just thinking about, money and a Sunday attendance is like the two big ones that people look at. Now, that's the model we're in. We're in a professional clergy environment. We're an organization. So we unless we are meeting those things, people aren't going to be happy. They're going to be distracted to what we're actually trying to do. And so we're measuring the wrong things. So here we had an opportunity to say, let's try to instill some things to measure that actually are related to the mission that we're trying to accomplish. And so that's basically how it, and again, Church Unique really helped us form our thinking on that, and they did a wonderful job consulting us to do it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's fun to get into these with some of our folks, and of course, people always have questions about the wordsmithing that happened and why we came up with what we came up with. Yeah. And but it all tells a story. And I would say my experience, John, has been sort of our value of what we call the complete local, but focusing on the health of the local church and making sure that's where our energy and emphasis is. That has been such a strength. And to me, when we take these measures and we begin to help our pastors and church leaders and elders understand them and begin to look at the church through that lens as a measure of success, it's actually takes so much of the pressure of those other things off and leads us in a better direction. Yeah. But it's hard to do because it's easy to count people in the pews, and it's, all of us pastors this time of year, if you're on a fiscal year, January, December end, like we're counting the pennies to see if we can get our budget where it needs to be. And so those are just really tangible things. And these other measures are a little more intangible to a point, and so that's why we wanted to talk about them, because even if it's just a mentality of starting to look at the church with a different perspective or fresh eyes for health, I think is just something we have to keep coming back to.
Yeah, I want to say, even just before we jump into these, the real beauty of these, in my opinion, is exactly what you said, John. It's helping people understand, how do we know that we are creating disciples? Like how do we? Otherwise, it's just anecdotal and subjective. So, and in a way, it still sort of is, but at least this gives us kind of a target to shoot for, to help to measure. And so I think it's really helpful for pastors and churches to get their hands on these. So I'm excited. So let's walk through them.
Yeah, let's do it. And before we jump in, if somebody wants to explore these more or do the assessment, John, where would we want to direct them for something like that?
Yeah, they could come to info@flourishmovement.org is one place, or they could just email me, and I'm sure we'll have that in the show notes or something. But just email me, and I'll put you in touch with Caitlin Wood. Now is our director of church health, and she's kind of overseeing all these things. What we did strategically, again, is all these processes that we went through, like Church Unique, and I do another one on more on the funding side of things called Fuel, is that we purchase them in essence to redistribute them through the denomination at a lower cost. And the organizations are wonderful to work with because they want us to do that. So I have a train the trainer type of things that we go through. So we have several navigators that walk people through the vision frame process that and several churches have obviously taken that and moved ahead with it, which is great. But that's our model, and anybody who wants more information, email me and I'll put you in touch with the right people.
Yeah. And Caitlin has been a frequent visitor on our podcast.
She's a friend of the podcast.
She's one of our favorites.
Yeah.
She's been on several times. This is my
She
first
has been
time,
on multiple times before you got a first appearance. So, those are inter-office politics you guys are going to have to
I will be sorting that out soon. Yes.
No, I love it. Well, let's get into some of these, and knowing that there is an opportunity if people want to explore more. We did this as a church in, I think, 2017 or 18. We did the Flourishing Church stuff and kind of answered a set of questions around each of these 6 measures and kind of scored ourselves on how we're doing towards this, the success of our mission. And so the first one that we have here for a measure is knows its unique identity and calling. Let's talk about that one. What's significant about this first measure?
Well, I think because when we look at it, again, you could definitely tell when we were doing these things that we knew that we were going to score poorly on all of them, essentially, in the church, right? So that was going in, we knew this, but so we wanted to stress these things. It's like, how many people in the congregation really do know what the church is trying to accomplish in mission, right? So our goal here was to help the church understand that it just can't be the pastor all the time, just casting vision and repeating the mission statement, but everybody has to be involved. So understanding that, we think, was absolutely key. Again, Will Mancini would say, clarity isn't the only thing, but it does change everything when you have it. So being clear on the unique identity and calling goes a long way. And I think maybe we talked about this already, but you all have a difficult job of going, not only leading the church and doing all the jobs of lead pastor, but you have to sell people this, right? You have to, in casting vision or mission, and it's really not casting, but it's dripping, I guess. It's like you're trying again to create a culture. It's so hard, but you need that buy-in from people. You need to have them looking at the right things. So that's what we were getting to on this, is that, do people know what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah. But when you look at this first one, are you looking at primarily like ecclesiology, or are you looking at the fact that, hey, I'm an octogenarian traditional church, I am not going to be a warehouse young adult skinny jeans church? In other words, we have a clear vision of who we're trying to reach and what we're good at. Is that part of it, or is it simply a theological lens through which to understand that it's the church's job to be the church, not just the pastor?
Well, I think yes to all of it, right? So it's I think what, again, is we want people to understand that it's just not the leadership of the church, but it has to be everybody that understands this and what we're uniquely called to do. What are we here to do in our community? Like, how are we making a difference in this community around us? So it is unique. It has to be contextual, and we can't be just another eco church on the corner, doing the same things that other eco churches do. No, it has to be a unique part of and studying of, like, how can we make a difference in our community, and how well is that communicated? How well do people understand it inside? If people do, if you have a large percentage of the people that do, then obviously things are going to be easier for you, because these measures will be something that they're looking at, right? Your own individual church measures of, like, when are we successful? When are we successful? And is that really related to the mission that we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And when we were answering questions around this, we actually found that we marked pretty high on people understanding or being able to articulate the mission statement. Like, they knew what we were trying to do. but we started to drop the score off when we were answering questions about how were they doing it, connecting or participating in that in some meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
So we were good at articulating the goal, but not always good at helping connect what's your part in that, and how can you be an active part of this thing that God is calling us to. So that's where some of our work started. For us, it was helpful to just ask that question, because we're all Great Commission, Great Commandment churches and Christians.
Right.
What's our unique thing? How has God made us, and who is our community around us, and where do those things intersect, and how do we do that well in a way that lights people's hearts up and gets them involved? So we found this one to be really helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's the first one. Jason, any other follow-ups or thoughts on?
No, I'm excited to talk about it. This next one is like my love language right here.
Yeah, Jason, this is the one where we scored off the charts, because, and I like to think that's a reflection of my leadership, for better or worse. But the second measure that helps us think about it, when is a church flourishing or successful? And this is it. I love it. Normalizes risk-taking. Mm-hmm. Normalize it. I love this one, John. Like, this is, Jason and I, this is why we do what we do. This is why we got into church revitalization and change and all that kind of stuff. And now the challenge, John, is all the things that we change to help our churches move in a healthier direction are all things that we now need to change again.
Oh, it's the worst.
To help our churches move in a healthy direction. And it's all stuff that we helped come up with. Yeah. So it was really easy to take risks to change other people's stuff. It's a lot harder when it was stuff that you helped come up with. So anyway, that's my little soapbox about this one. But let's talk about risk-taking. What is so important about risk-taking for churches?
Well, I think we get too stuck in the safe, right? So we don't try different things. As the old saying goes, we keep on doing the same things and expecting different results. So that's what this is really trying to get at. Churches aren't good at taking risks, because a lot of times people are, again, using different measures of saying, well, we could lose money on that. Mm-hmm. God forbid we lose money on this particular program that we're trying to do. Now, of course, these are the things that you have to go through and try different things to see what works. Again, uniquely contextual to your particular part of the world and in your unique community. So we can't keep on doing the same thing and expecting different results. So it's there exactly to drive that. Now, I mentioned before that I had that restaurant, right? So I can tell you so many different things I learned from that enormous failure, right? And so what we say here is that we want people to learn from, doing new things and taking risks and failing, because we will, again, know what not to do in the situation or what doesn't work. That's a great thing to learn. And it does take some risk to do that, but you have to be willing to go and lose some money. Maybe doing something different that's going to really not make some people happy inside the congregation. Well, it's not about them sometimes, right? So we want to get that culture of risk-taking more talked about, or at least, and certainly practiced, but at least the conversation started about taking risks. And risk isn't a bad thing, but it's a necessary thing to learn and to reach new things and new directions.
So good. And Jason, this is something you guys, I think you do a really good job of this, but of celebrating even failure, like risk that leads to failure. Jason does a great job of just going, hey, we tried, look what we did, and look what we learned, and now let's apply it in a new way. I tend to like to celebrate the risks that paid off, so I guess some working to do there. But Jason, tell us a little bit about that. You're so good at risk taking, like that. I was the Saturday night or Sunday night service that you guys tried to launch. It didn't work, but now it led to this new thing you're doing on Sunday morning. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think it's approaching each challenge in the church with a certain amount of winsome excitement. And hey, if we all understand what's at stake, that's really what this is. If you understand what's at stake, then people will be willing to give it a shot, whatever that shot is. Mm-hmm. And whenever pastors ask me this question, and this may be the most frequently asked question, is, well, hey, I'm in this church and there are so many different things we could choose to focus on. I don't even know where to start. And I always tell them, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. If you can get your church focused on a mission-related risk, what that's going to do is there's no such thing as failure. Because now, even if the outcome isn't what you had planned or expected, you all faithfully took a step toward faithfulness in mission together. And that just grew everybody's faith. So there is no wasted movement in risk taking, in my opinion. When it's out of the place that we're trying to be more faithful and fruitful. And so when we take a risk, where it helps us to do that, even if we don't get 500 new families or something.
So you said something interesting. You said when they understand what's at stake. Unpack that one for me.
Yeah. So for example, for us, it was how are we going to reach the next generation of young families, and what will it take to engage them, recognizing their lives are what they are on weekends, and could we try a different model to attempt to reach them at a better time? So what happened was we got buy-in around all of our leadership and our church that what we really need to do is whatever it takes to reach them. Yeah. And so when we tried a thing and it didn't work, it didn't matter. It's like, okay, well, all right, that didn't work. So what's the thing that is going to work? Let's keep talking about that. Let's figure it out. But if they understand the why, they're going to try a whole bunch of different whats. It doesn't even matter. Because they believe in the why. So I think the work of the pastor is to help create a sense of urgency in the congregation and the leadership.
Bingo.
And then we together work on solving the problem. And some of those problem solutions aren't going to work.
Yeah.
I love that. That sense of urgency is really an interesting thing, right? Because I think that's where that starts to rub against people's opinions. Because for some of our folks, and I think, let's be honest, I think a lot of our population is more of the older generation. What's at stake for them sometimes goes against what's at stake for the church in general. So it could be like, well, what's at stake is that I'm gonna lose my way of doing things, the way I like them. And so we have to creating that sense of urgency and understanding what's at stake. I think is you have to be very crafty in a sense, or just really a good communicator to make that connection. So it's what's at stake is missing that next generation. That's right.
And tying it sometimes, John, to kids and grandkids. I mean, a lot of the heartache for our people is they say, I just, my heart breaks that my kids or my grandkids aren't at church. And I'm like, well, what's it gonna take for us to reach them? So then it kind of changes it from us saying this is a good idea to now sometimes the urgency comes by asking a good open-ended question, right?
Yes.
That helps them generate their own sense of urgency around the problem.
Great word there. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. So I love it. We could go on and on.
I know we could spend an hour on risk taking.
The only other little tidbit I'd throw in is when you get a track record of risk taking that has some failure and some success in it. Now you can point back and say, look, remember when what we learned, or remember when we took that step and look what happened, look what God did. The world didn't end. We kept moving forward, or wow, God really took that. And that helps us to create kind of a flywheel effect of risk taking. So do it. And it might feel really uncomfortable at first, but that's going to lead to hopefully some good things. Jason, it's been really fun to talk to John so far, and we're interrupting the conversation right there because there's so much to say when it comes to healthy church, and then you and we get really jazzed up about stuff like risk taking. So the episode grew on us a little bit, which is a good thing. There's so much to talk about, and so we're going to come back to the other four measures, and we'll talk about those in our next episode. But really just thinking about some takeaways already from this conversation we're having with John, as he kind of gets to see things from a bigger picture view of what's working and where things are a challenge in the local church. So anything you're taking away so far?
Yeah, I just think this was a great reminder on the importance of measuring the outcomes to know if we're actually hitting the target that we think we're hitting. And I know that's not exclusive to the church, but I think churches uniquely struggle with this more than other organizations, is that we don't know how to measure church health. We all know that we care about it and we want to do these different things, but how do we know we're actually achieving what we're hoping for, or at least that we're even shooting at the target that we think we're shooting at, right? You have to kind of be able to measure it and get down and figure it out. And these things really help to frame it for churches, I think, in a real practical way.
Yeah. And I think really the idea is it ought to, in some ways, generate some questions for us to be asking. How is this going? What could we do to to help it go better so that people know what we're trying to do, our unique identity and calling? Or how do we help people celebrate risk taking, whether we're failing or succeeding as we move toward the mission, and all that kind of stuff as a way to think about a healthy church.
Yeah.
So really good stuff, good food for thought for our leadership teams, for us as pastors. And can't wait to share the second half of the conversation with you all. We're going to get into missional living, disciple making, leadership development, those kinds of things next time. And so don't miss the second half of this fantastic conversation with John Terech.
Well, as we say, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you next week.